Hey everybody, happy Tuesday and welcome to another Techstrong TV broadcast. Today is Tuesday, April 19th. I am Charlene O'Hanlon and I have an amazing lineup on today's show to bring to you. We get things kicked off with a conversation between Alan and Aaron Reinhardt, who is a co-founder and CTO of Verica, and Tony De La Fuente, who is the head of Prowler over at Verica. They discuss the acquisition of Prowler by Verica. Prowler is an open source tool for AWS cloud security. It's one of the best known out there. And as a result of the acquisition, Verica is launching a new enterprise grade edition of Prowler called Prowler Pro. So Alan and Aaron and Tony all have a conversation about it, what it means for Verica, what it means for Prowler as well. Good stuff. After that, we have the Haunted Hacker podcast. This is a really fascinating continuation of a really fascinating conversation that Mike Jones, the host, has with Richard Thiem, who is a legend in the cybersecurity space. He is, he's a former priest. He became a commenter on technology and culture, and he's founder of the consulting firm ThemeWorks. So they have a very, very spirited conversation, if you will, about cybersecurity and so much more. And as I said, this is the continuation of a conversation that started yesterday. It's a two-part, so today's part two. All right, after that, we have two something old segments, and they are both from the recent Predict 2022 virtual event. The first one features Victor Gamov, who is a principal developer advocate over at Kong, and his presentation is titled Top API and Digital Transformation Trends for 2022. So he talks about 12 key developments that the company and the market is beginning to see in the world of digital transformation, APIs, and the cloud, and how developers can be ready and companies can be ready for them. That's a really, really interesting one. The second one is by Alice Kopp-Rivnikar, who is the senior sales engineer over at Chronosphere. And Alice's presentation is titled Leveraging Observability for Competitive Edge. So this is, Chronosphere is an observability platform. So Alice introduces us to Chronosphere and how organizations can use it to control the rampant data growth and cloud native complexity that is occurring these days. It's a very, very interesting presentation as well. After that, I'm back with the news headlines, and then I have a great conversation with Susan St. Clair, who is the Director of Product Management over at WhiteSource, and she and I discuss some key findings from a recent WhiteSource NPM report, the Npm Threat Report, I should say, and we also talk about some of the current security threats to open source software, as well as what steps organizations can take to mitigate these security risks. It's a great conversation. I really enjoyed speaking with Susan. After that, I have another conversation. This one is with Avi Shua, who is the CEO and co-founder over at Orca Security. Avi has been on Techstrong TV before. This time, we discuss some of the results of the Orca Security 2022 Cloud Security Alert Fatigue Report, which is the industry's first research report on public cloud security alert fatigue. Lots of really fascinating findings in this report, and if you are working with cloud security and open source, definitely want to check out this presentation or this conversation that I have with him. After that, I have the webinars preview, and then we close things out with a view with Vizard. In this one, Mike Vizard speaks with Ronak Raman, who is a developer relations manager over at Quali, and they talk about developer burnout and why minimizing developer burnout has become a key performance indicator for DevOps teams, especially relevant in today's new way of working. It's a great conversation. It's a great topic, too. All right, that's it for today's lineup. It's a good one, folks. I hope you can stick around for the entirety, and we are going to get things kicked off right after these commercial messages.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech Conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech Conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech Conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech Conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech Conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Kicking things off on today's Techstrong TV broadcast, we have a conversation between Alan and Aaron Reinhardt, who is the co-founder and CTO at Verica, and Tony De La Fuente, who is the head of Prowler at Verica. Verica recently acquired Prowler, which is an open source tool for AWS cloud security. It's one of the most widely known tools out there for AWS cloud security. And as part of the acquisition, Verica is launching a new enterprise-grade edition of Prowler called Prowler Pro. So it's a great conversation about what this means for Prowler, what this means for Verica, and what this means for the industry at large. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV interview. We've got some breaking news to go over with you today. I am joined by my friend Aaron Reinhardt from Verica. And good afternoon, good morning Aaron, how are you? And joining Aaron and I is, I hope I don't mess this up, but Tony De La Fuente. Close?
Yes, very good, well said.
Okay, hey Tony, welcome.
Thank you.
So, Tony, since you're the new guy on the show today, why don't you give people a little bit about you and your company?
Sure, thank you. Thanks for having us here today. So, well, I have around 23 years of experience in this industry, most of the time doing cybersecurity. I've done many different things in the open source security space as well, with different projects. In the last years, I started an open source project called Prowler, where I started developing in 2016, more or less. It has become more and more popular in the last years. Actually, well, I have worked for AWS as well, for Amazon as a consultant and as a security engineer as well. And recently I joined Verica. And now we are building a product on top of Prowler. And of course, keeping Prowler open source, investing in Prowler, and trying to fill the gap between the Prowler open source and what we want to bring to customers. That's pretty
excellent. Aaron, Tony gave us a whole story here already, but I'm going to let you give a little background. First of all, look, Verica is a company and a group very familiar to our audience. We try to cover Verica's news as much as we can. But for those who maybe aren't familiar with Verica, Aaron, why don't you give them a little background and maybe a little bit, I don't know, most of the people I think are probably familiar with you as well, but give them a little about you as well.
Are you trying to say people are tired of hearing from me, Alan? No,
I would never say that.
First of all, it's great to see you as always. Thank you very much for having us on the show. Really appreciate it. I know Tony and I appreciate it. A little bit of background about me. I'm the CTO and co-founder here at Verica. I co-founded Verica with Casey Rosenthal, the creator of Chaos Engineering at Netflix. He wrote this O'Reilly book. Where he's known as being the creator of Chaos Engineering. I'm known as being the creator of Security Chaos Engineering. And we have evolved here at Verica. We've evolved a practice that we're sort of the foundational creators of chaos engineering. We've evolved the practice to be something we call continuous verification, which the Prowler open source and Prowler commercial, Prowler Pro products fit nicely into. We believe, so Verica provides a platform for proactively uncovering system weaknesses and security flaws before they impact business outcomes. And as part of that, we believe in building a series and suite of tools to help people understand their systems better from an availability and security perspective before they cause pain, right? And so that's sort of a proactive discipline, proactive product, series of products. A couple of things that Tony didn't mention. Tony is super humble. Tony is one of the top people in the world with AWS security, but Prowler, this is recent news. Also, the open source project. We're here to announce the Prowler Pro, coming to the world. But Prowler is now one of the top 10 AWS in general open source security tools. It is the number one security tool, open source security tool for AWS, surpassing Security Monkey from Netflix and Cloud Custodian, formerly of Capital One. So it's a good times right now.
Absolutely. Very, very well known. And then, look, Tony talked about it, Aaron. You've kind of beaten around the bush. But the big news I wanted to get through to our audience today is that Prowler, the Prowler open source tool will remain an open source tool, but it's now under the not the governance, management, if you will, oversight by Verica. Right? And Prowler Pro, which is built on Prowler, will be part of the Verica product line, right? So for all intents and purposes, as these things go, Verica has acquired Prowler, maybe the IP, if you will, and copyrights. When we get to open source, this gets to be a very, it's a very kind of delicate way of talking about it, because really, who owns open source, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I can clarify.
Yeah, but I've been in open source for 25, 30 years. The fact of the matter is, as my friend Ron Guler always says, open source, it's free as in beer and free as in freedom. And free as in freedom talks about code, right? And the source code and your ability to fork and modify, again, given parameters of making changes back to the community. And then free as in cost, which is a different, money thing. But that being said, what a great pickup for Verica. What a nice addition to the portfolio. And that's really what this talks about. Now, I'm going to assume, Tony, that you're now working with Verica full time. Yeah?
Exactly.
And are there any other people from the Prowler project that are coming on board full time with Verica?
Yeah, exactly. So since October, when I joined Verica, we have grown the team, and we are now 4 full-time engineers working for Prowler and the Prowler product, Prowler Pro. And actually, since then, we have released 3 new versions of Prowler open source, and releasing another one tomorrow, or this week. And so the investment of Verica in Prowler open source and the product is very important, because it allows us to grow the product faster, to make also the open source product way better, with more comprehensive, with more fixes, and also with more new features. At the end of the day, Prowler open source is core. It's a big, important part of the Prowler Pro product. So it's a win-win in both sides. And of course, we are keeping all the open part of Prowler, because the community is so important. So think that Prowler has almost 500,000 downloads and thousands of downloads per day. Mm-hmm. So we have a huge community that they use Prowler broadly and improve Prowler. So we want to take advantage of that. in addition to help companies that they want to use Prowler also with enterprise support, with better experience in general in terms of usage.
Excellent. Hey, Aaron, Tony's obviously in the middle of the trees in the forest of Prowler, but I'm going to ask you, as maybe someone who has more of a forest view, explain to our audience what exactly Prowler does, and then what will Prowler Pro offer over and above what Prowler open source does?
Yeah, great question, Alan. First of all, I mean, we're not only investing in Prowler, the community, and trying to provide more dedication and attention to it. Tony's a pretty great investment as a human being. He's great to work with. I value him as a partner, and I think we're doing great things together as a team. And I think we're bringing something to the market that that is really needed. I mean, Prowler you can almost say, if you're using AWS, you're probably using Prowler if you care about security. It does. The open source tool out of the box does more than most of the commercial tools do you can buy. So what we provided, so Verica, like I said before, provides a suite of products in our continuous verification sort of suite that helps proactively identify security flaws, system weaknesses, and that's kind of where chaos engineering is more. Chaos engineering is one tool set within there. Sort of there's continuous assessment and audit of configuration, and that's really where Prowler fits in. Prowler is our first big step into really delivering a huge amount of value from a security perspective in AWS. What we've done is that we've not only the improvements that we've made in the commercial product, things like, taking the time it takes to run. Really, I'm not the best person to explain it. Tony did the work. Tony knows his customer base really well. He knows the value we provide. But really, I mean, we're just additional features and functionalities and capabilities above and beyond what the open source tool provides. And Tony, do you want to talk about the hard work you've been doing and trying to answer the pain that people have been having that use Prowler?
Sure. So basically what Prowler does is to tell you what you are doing wrong in your cloud. Basically, this is how I will explain to my mom, more or less. But if you go in detail with Prowler, you get you can scan your account or multiple AWS accounts across all the regions and multiple AWS services as well to find what you have right or wrongly configured. And you can do all that stuff with Prowler using the command line. So what we have done in Prowler Pro is, on top of that we, let's call it scanner, like to scan your accounts, we have added automation, so you can deploy everything without having to waste time on figuring out how to do the continuous monitoring. So you can do that automatically with Prowler Pro. If you have multiple accounts or just one single account, is very easy to set up because it does everything for you. And of course, with enterprise support. But the main difference between Prowler Pro and other products that you can find out there is that you own everything when you use Prowler Pro. And when I say everything, is that the data is yours because it's in your own bucket, it's in your own databases. It's not like a SaaS product where you have to trust third parties. With Prowler Pro, you only have to trust what you have in your account because it's going to be deployed in your accounts. Actually, it is available through the AWS Marketplace.
Understood. Very cool. Aaron, look, as you mentioned, this is a big move into an area that Verica always wanted to play in, right? But let's be clear, it's not in the chaos engineering sweet spot that you and Casey, right, are kind of, founders in, right? This is in, more of the continuous monitoring vulnerability, which is, look, it's a huge space, right? It's more, if I may use the term, meat and potatoes security, right?
Yeah.
From that.
Yes. Yeah, no, sorry. Yeah, no, that's a great question, Alan. Like I said, we've kind of evolved the practice to be, so continuous verification includes the chaos engineering kind of sort of experimentation on proactively discovering system weaknesses and flaws from an availability security perspective. But there's also other tools that kind of fit in that continuous verification envelope. There's things like feature flagging, there's auto canaries, there's tools like Prowler that continuously assess and audit. Make sure so Prowler does more than, so some of the things that maybe Tony can expand on later is sort of, Prowler assesses against almost every security compliance framework out there. So when you buy a product you want to be able to sort of holistically kind of assess, not just experiment on the system to try to find the unknown unknowns. You also want to have a product that can find the things you need to cover, right? And so that's kind of really where Prowler kind of fits in. The Prowler Pro product fits in, is it helps people proactively ensure that the systems are your AWS environments are as secure as you think they are. And we also have other products in the Verica. Excuse me, I'm a little under the weather. I'm trying to keep it together. Okay. We have other products in the Verica suite of products for Kubernetes and Kafka that also provide AWS functionality, but they do it specifically for those platforms. But this is like you said, it's meat and potato security. But when you buy a product, you kind of want to holistically have an understanding of, okay, does the system do what I want to do, both from a known attributes and also from trying to discover what you think what you didn't know, or sort of the unknown unknowns per se.
Yep, fair enough. Hey guys, we're coming up on the end of time here, but for people who want to get more information about Prowler, Prowler Pro, the whole Verica suite, well, obviously it's verica.io, right, Aaron? I believe it was IO. Yes, and that's verica.io. For Prowler, is it like a GitHub, or where do people go to find out on Prowler?
It's very easy to find Prowler. If you look for Prowler AWS or Prowler AWS Security, you find it. But also you can find everything about Prowler Pro in prowler.pro.
Prowler.pro, that's easy. And then I would imagine, Aaron, the Verica site will be linking into that as well.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, yes, Alan.
Sure. And in the AWS Marketplace as well. Yeah.
Yep. Well, that's a good place to find it as well. All right. Hey, Aaron, congratulations to you and Casey and the whole Verica team. Tony, congratulations to you. You're with good people there. And we'll be looking forward to see the continued growth of Prowler, where Prowler Pro comes, and how this all influences Verica as well. Hope to see you guys in Spain in May for Cloud Native KubeCon. But until then, gentlemen, be well.
Yes, sir.
This is Alan Schimmel.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. This is Alan Schimmel for Techstrong TV. We'll be right back in a moment.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, we're back. Next up, we've got the Haunted Hacker Podcast. This is a great one that host Mike Jones has with Richard Thiem. Richard Thiem is a former priest who became a commentator on technology and culture. He's also founder of a consulting firm called ThemeWorks, and he's very, very well known in the cybersecurity space. This is part 2 of a 2-part conversation that the two of them have about pretty much everything related to cybersecurity. It's a great conversation. I highly encourage you to check out part 1, which ran yesterday, and part 2, which is running right now. So let's go ahead and roll it.
I was curious. So back when I was younger, I used to have a lot of deja vu, and it's gotten less and less. But I remember this incident when I was in third grade. I think it went on for about 3 weeks. I would literally get home that night and then realize that I had already just started the day because I had already lived through the day. But it took me about 3 weeks before I realized that every day was just a repeat of the night before. I don't know if I was just dreaming it or what happened, but, I tried to tell my parents and they're like, oh, you're, and I was like, no, you don't understand. I think I'm in a dream. And then I wake up and I'm going to school and it's happening again. And I'm like, I don't know how to say other than deja vu what that is. And it happens on occasion. There's just this overwhelming sense of like dreamlike state when it happens. And I'm like, I've been here. I've done this. This has happened before. But it like by the, I don't know, like I said, about 3 weeks in, I was starting to go like, what is going on? Like, how is it that I'm living every day beforehand? Plus it's school and I'm in third grade. So who wants to do that every day? Like twice. So it was kind of getting annoying, but I was just curious, like, as far as like deja vu, what do you think of like things like that as far as the spiritual side of things? Because I was raised in the Deep South, so religion has always been forced upon me more than anything.
And a very different kind of religion.
Yes. And so I did a lot of studying of religions when I was in, my teenage years as well. I had like an encyclopedia of all religions at that time, so I like read that and didn't make my parents very happy because I started questioning everything. So,
Right.
But yeah, what do you feel about like, different types of spiritual, like deja vu and stuff? Like, do you consider that a type of like spiritual or?
Well, what you're describing, deja vu is a sense of having been here before. And I don't know if you're describing exactly how people use that in common parlance. You're describing what sounds like precognition. And you're describing in dream states, you were open, at the very obvious level, you're taking in so much more information than you know. And your unconscious is processing it. And sometimes your unconscious wants you to know things. I just posted a thing, I don't know if you saw it, on LinkedIn, a letter that I wrote to my kids about a big dream in a Jungian sense. And it was about what that dream revealed to me. And when I was writing Mobius, before I went to bed, I would sit there and think of where I had left off and where I needed to begin in the morning. And I always woke up ready to do it because the brain worked on it. So what I do is listen to people like yourself telling me what they experienced. And it was precognitive because in our dream states, time is a different animal than the way our conscious mind sorts time out, which is first a cultural assimilation and second of a beneficial illusion of as if things stream the way we have been taught by our society to build them into a cognitive structure. So I just hear you. And you weren't content to just take a black and white, Jesus loves you, don't even question anything else. Jesus would not put up with the bullshit that is coming down the line as religion. One of the hardest things about being in the ministry was trying to ask people to look at what Jesus did and what happened to him.
Yeah.
He wasn't chairman of the board. He was crucified, right? Well, why? Because he couldn't let go of the wholeness and integrity with which he advocated we all live our lives in a wholeness in relationship to the deeper structures of the universe. Well, that gets you in trouble with consensual reality, with society. And, you talk about the intelligence community. Well, I won't go there.
So organized religion is actually what turned me away from religion. It's not that I'm not spiritual and have faith. There's so many. And when you start researching, right, you start to see that there is a common thread, right? People want to be good, do well. It can be used for bad. Like, people in power can use that as an abuse technique as well. But overall, the core values of all religions are to, love one another, be good to your neighbors, do things that are not harmful to each other, right? Like the core values.
It is that basic. That
it is. It really is.
614 laws. They said follow these. And then Jesus and some rabbis said, well, all you need 10 commandments, just need 10, not 16 to 14. And then that got broken down. Jesus and some rabbis said, well, all you really need is 2. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind, love your neighbor as yourself. And that breaks down to with just 1, do the loving thing. Well, that becomes situation ethics, and people go crazy because they want to be given a beginner's style black and white rule book on how do I behave under these conditions. And that's not the way the world presents itself to you. It fires itself at you at point blank range every morning. Do the loving thing. That's it.
I think about how I think how it would be so different had Constantine not taken certain books out of the Bible and had the Catholic Church acknowledge Dead Sea Scrolls and some of those other facts that were there that we decided as a civilization to extract and exclude from the regular teachings. Absolutely. The editor is the equivalent of the person who counts the votes, right? And Stalin said, I don't care who's voting. I want to count the votes. And I got through college, Northwestern, working with the Daily Machine in Chicago. And I was at Democratic headquarters and Kennedy was elected. And around 10 o'clock at night, I got very anxious. I'm a kid. I'm 16 years old. And I said, doesn't look so good. He's hundreds of thousands of votes behind. And this old Paul, he says to me, kid, is this your first one? And I said, yeah. He says, kid, don't worry. We got this. I said, but look at that. He says, kid, don't worry. And then all night long, the votes changed and changed and changed. Bottom line was they were waiting for the votes from downstate so they knew what they needed to create. And he won by a little bit, but it was enough. And it's like when somebody asked me in Australia, how could you reelect George Bush a second time? I said, in America, if you steal the election fair and square, you get to keep it. That's right. It's true until current.
Well, that's where they say, history is written by the winners, right? That's so right. They get to choose. They get to choose. And another thing that I learned actually during being methodized, when I was a teenager, I had to go through, the courses and stuff. They, one of the most interesting facts, which is kind of hilarious because it also made me question them, is that the Old Testament versus the New Testament in Christianity, they pointed out, which I was kind of actually happy that they did. They had started to accept the Big Bang Theory and some science into, Christianity at that time. But they, the Old Testament had an old, angry God. Well, times were old. And in those times were tough. So, of course, the God came down as wrathful and vengeful. And then as things kind of eased up and got a little bit better, Jesus became a little bit nicer. And then we have Jesus and everything's nicer and lovely.
It's evolved.
It has. It definitely has evolved a huge part of religion you have to look at that culture, right? How is their culture evolved over time and stuff?
Oh, yeah. The God of the Old Testament. I mean, I say, why is there not any anti-Jebusitism or anti-parasitism, but there's anti-Semitism? Well, because they're Jews. Well, what happened to the other guys? The Jews killed them. Look over and they say, we want that pasture. And God would say to them through a prophet, go get it. They were Putin on camels. It's just, it's just the Old Testament is full of blood and thunder. And Mark Twain wrote a wonderful book about a guy who went to his pastor. He said, I think I want to become a Christian. He says, well, read the Bible and then imitate God. So he read the Bible and then he shot his neighbor and he said, and he went on and he told the pastor what he'd done. And he said, why'd you do that? He said, well, I read the Bible and I was imitating God. And he said, well, yeah, how's the weather been up where you are? But what I wanted to say was what both of you have said is when you begin to awaken as an individual to other ways of seeing things. And for hackers, that's just a common story. I loved what I found online. I just threw myself into it. I intuitively followed the wires and the non-wires. I followed the symbols, really the symbolic representation of how information and energy moves in its digital reconstruction. And then other people didn't understand. You need someone to help. And so one of the reasons I became an Anglican is I did have profound experiences, but I realized if I wasn't going to go crazy with this stuff, I needed mentoring. Mm-hmm. I needed a structure that didn't dismiss what I'd experienced, all the lights and shadows and all the symbolic innuendo, that I was studying to filter into my consciousness, but I needed people to help me manage it. And then I was very, very fortunate to have two mentors, one the dean of the seminary, one the first bishop, who were the best mentors one could dream. And I came to the conclusion that in order for any organization or individual to function well, you need at least three things. Mutuality, you need others. You need feedback. And the more information moves, the more feedback loops you need. And that's why systems of information have gotten so complex, because there's so many sensors, so much information, and AI is showing us, not only am I going to do things that you don't know how to do, I'm not going to tell you how I do it, but it's going to work. So are you with me or not? Well, the answer from society is, yeah, we don't know where else to go. Sure, we're with you. Show us a drug that kills that kind of bacteria, even if we had no idea such a drug existed, because you've looked at 500,000 possibilities of chemical combination and you found one that killed that bacteria. Just let us patent it. That's the only deal. You're an AI, you can't patent it, you can't make money, you're not real. Well, I am real. Well, yeah, but not in that way. So we need mutuality, feedback, and we need accountability. And This is where the values come in that we're talking about. It doesn't have to come from an organized religion, but you have to have accountability for a vision, for some kind of ethos, some kind of bottom line. And that's where leadership comes in. Leadership of any organized structure has to impose their understanding of an ethos on the organization, on the system, or else it's not going to be there.
So my thoughts on AI are a little different. I think my thoughts on AI is that I don't think we can obtain true AI until we understand exactly what consciousness is. And without that level of, I guess, knowledge or insight into what really makes something conscious, I think it'd be hard to replicate that consciousness into artificial intelligence.
I think you're probably right, sure. But I don't think we need to know what consciousness is for AI to do some of the remarkable things it's currently doing.
Right.
I don't know if you read the piece the other day about how many, it's dual use. Everything we're talking about is dual use. You asked about technology and shoot 'em ups, and that's where the ethos and accountability comes in. It can be used for good, it can be used for evil. But that was the same with words. That was this, lies and truth were Siamese twins joined at the lips. As soon as somebody could speak, they could lie. And we know chimpanzees deceive one another. Oh, there's banana. And you walk past, the stories. Chimpanzee walks with the troop past it, and then he circles around behind, gets the banana. They engage in deception operations. That's just always been with us. So we do need to have some criteria for doing things that work. And as I said before, they should work on behalf of win-win. Otherwise, you really are going to get a Putin and a Ukraine. But on the other hand, one of my children said, Dad, was it any different when we went into Iraq? I just don't remember that we had nightly news showing us the horrific villages we destroyed, the people we killed, the bodies strewn about. In fact, if somebody revealed what we did, like a drone going wild, killing lots of civilians by mistake, what they did is put Chelsea Manning, it was Chelsea then, right?
Yeah.
Put Manning into prison and tortured him. They put him in solitary confinement, which is torture. We listed among the tortures we use. And that the novel I wrote, Mobius, it was doing torture that impacted him so traumatically that he couldn't give his assent to what they were doing. And that was drawn on the people I've talked to years ago, before it had been outed, before rendition was a word everyone understood. I was talking to people who tortured people, and I was talking to people who'd been tortured. And it was horrific. And it took a therapist to tell me, you're showing symptoms of secondary trauma. Wow. Take a break. And that kind of experience led to the talk I gave at DEF CON called Playing Through the Pain. It's been seen by a lot of people. And someone keeps pointing out, I sat there listening to people sobbing around. And I'm not kidding. DEF CON, imagine 1,000 geeks in a room and you hear sniffles and sobbing. Because I realized I had been listening for so many years to, in a ministerial way, what people told me the work did to them. the impact of it. And I wrote to a lot of colleagues and said, I want to address this. Can you share stories? Over 50 people, intelligence, security, military, corporate, sent stories, and built that talk and the next one called The Road to Resilience, in which I really urged people to take seriously the traumatic impact of just doing the work because of the nature of the work and what it exposed you to. So you want to be in Air Force AFOSI, you mind looking for weeks and weeks at child pornography so you become desensitized to it?
Yeah.
Oh, you can't handle that? All right, but do you get help for not being able to handle it? The work is daunting. And the fact is, when you work in intelligence and you work in the bowels of security, if you don't encounter those gray areas, and if you don't confront, as friends of mine in the intelligence community call it, the face of evil, and the abyss stares into you, you have to have a spiritual structure for dealing with this because it's not going to go away.
Yeah, 100%.
And the digital world just raises it to a meta level because the speed with which things are happening, and above all, the abstraction, the level of abstraction. And it is an elite. I mean, there are a lot of people who pretend to be an elite, but there are elites who pretty much, you might include yourself as one, who have a clue, understand what it is that this stuff is and what it's about and how it can be manipulated for good or for evil. And so it's great that we can have a Zoom talk like this. It saved my life during COVID. But it's not great that Zoom can be so hackable.
Yes.
Et cetera, right?
Yeah, exactly. Working in intelligence, it definitely is a different type of environment, and they're different people. From the point where I entered into the military and got the SF-86, the background check, the clearance, and all that good stuff, to the point where I got out of the military after, the war in Afghanistan. It took me a good 15 years to go file for disability from the VA because it took me that long to take a look at everything I've been through and everything I'd seen and experienced and decided, am I okay with this? Is this something that I can go to bed at night and go, I did what I was supposed to do. So then I started looking at all the effects it had on me over the years and decided that, maybe I should get help for that. Maybe I should get disability. Maybe I should have them help me out where I sacrificed for them. But I think a lot of people go through that. I didn't necessarily have, missing limbs or anything like that. And that's part of the reason why I didn't go get, disability, because I felt bad. I didn't want to take away from those guys. But what I realized is that they have more than enough for everybody.
Absolutely.
And just having that exposure, even if you weren't in the middle of it, just having that exposure to that intelligence does things to you. It does things to your psyche.
It absolutely does. And at some point you lose, you tell yourself stories to make it, to ameliorate the impact. And at some point you lose your innocence and you realize you're knee deep in it or eye deep in hell. And you're part of it.
And even like Mike, your dad, in his background, my dad was in the military, went in several, Vietnam, Iraq and everything. Just even being a child of someone who's already experienced that, those side effects of how they react to things and how they process information and pass it down to us, right? So even the children are affected by that. So getting that help ahead of time to help people process, which is relatively new. Like my father, I think, had started to kind of like go towards the light of psychology and stuff for himself, towards the end. But at the same time, like it's good to get help ahead of time because you don't understand the everlasting effects. Like there are things that my father would not talk about. Men didn't cry. He was from the war. Like I never knew exactly what he did. He never talked about it. It was too traumatic, right? So, and how does that pass down further down the line, right? So,
not only that, but talk about paranormal experiences in those situations. Yeah. Like you would be surprised, maybe not surprised, but shocked, I guess. The people that I had communication with that experienced like really horrible things on the battlefield and experience paranormal effects. And I'm not talking like, ghosts or demons. I'm talking about real paranormal effects where they felt like something's attached to them and they just can't get rid of it. And, they label it as PTSD, they label it as, whatever. But these guys had real paranormal experiences. I mean, things you can't quantify, things you can't describe or make sense of.
That's exactly right. You may not be able to articulate what it is, but it's real.
Yeah.
You've experienced it. And, going back to the UFO thing just briefly, that's one of the things people often report is that they have paranormal experiences, especially telepathic communication during the experience. And my head is now flooded with 44 years of stories that I've heard, and I want to do justice to that, but I don't want to leave what you just said because we're kind of wrapping up pretty soon. And what you just said is the cornerstone of the whole thing. It's a system. It's why family therapy is needed, not individual therapy. Everybody in the system affects everybody else. Everybody has a role to play. And if the key person doesn't ameliorate the symptoms and their response to the symptoms, then it, from generation to generation, it goes from generation to generation. And that's why spirituality, as we've been talking about it in a deeper way, is a societal level operation for the whole human race. Once we recognize that we are all in it together, then we each can be responsible for doing what we need to do. And that goes all the way back to those courses I said I taught. I wanted people to know that they were putting out emotion all the time, whether they knew it or not. And therefore, the Christian paradigm was about having some kind of a structure of accountability so that you would be moving toward the direction of putting out what you wanted to put out. In other words, we talked about love is the bottom line. Well, if you think you're loving, but you're really not being loving at all, can you get the feedback so that you can make the changes? And here you are at the Serenity Prayer again. We can control almost nothing, but the little bit we can get our hands on is everything for us and in our lives. And for your dad, it was you. Because, even as you speak, there's a vibration of how you feel about all that, right? It
Absolutely.
It all go away. Right. So
I think everybody's interconnected too. So you talk about the connection between people and giving off love. Well, I look at it as like a spiritual chain. So each person gives off a certain vibration, and those make the links in the chain. Well, if you have a weak link that isn't awake or hasn't woke up yet, that's where the disconnect, I think, is. And I think as a society, we're starting to wake up a little bit more piece by piece.
Well, I do think Dan Gear, Dan Gear, pretty bright guy. He sent me a passage the other day, but the gist of it was, there's this terrible stuff, but 98% of the human race, we're just good enough people trying to do the right thing, being generous. You see the swarming, like I used to say it was like white corpuscles racing to a wound when somebody was injured in the community. Everybody just mobilizes their best self to what can I do to help? Well, you can't operate that way all the time, but you can do it with intensity and meaning and purpose and intentionality in the moment of need.
Absolutely.
And most people do that. Most of us are not so bad.
Right.
But the context, as you say, can inflect us in the direction of doing things which are kind of bad. And then we have to deal with it.
Yeah.
I guess it's been about an hour, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has, Richard. I could go on forever with you, Richard. I could sit here for hours and just pick your brain to pieces because there's so many questions I still have unanswered that I still want to talk to you about. So hopefully we can get a second episode at some point so I can pick your brain a little bit more.
Before you leave, hold on. I want to jump back for just a second because you mentioned Hal, and I know who Hal is, but I have always forced myself after high school and being forced to read, to jump back to different periods in time and read literature just so that my brain can comprehend the different time periods and get, all that good stuff. Right. Same with movies. So the last older movie that I watched was Paperman. So, and that one was, I want to say, I can't remember, 79, something like it's older, and it's about credit card fraud. It's amazing. It's the quality on YouTube was not, but my question for you is, could you give me 2 picks for an older movie and a piece of literature that you would suggest I could read?
Oh boy. Well, for literature, it's obvious. I mean, Mobius, a memoir, is the best thing you can read.
Oh, yes.
I'm going to be choosing. I have to plug it because nobody else is doing marketing, right? So I have to plug it when I can. But if you look at the reviews on Amazon, they're all real. I didn't make them up. Nobody made them up.
No bots.
The response was terrific to this book. And I get private messages from people in the intelligence community saying, you articulated on our behalf what we can't say. The complexity of the challenges. Even from a KGB illegal who was here for the KGB for 10 years before he was nailed by the FBI. And he said, Mobius is surreal and real. So
that on the list.
For literature, I mean, it's very eclectic, the kinds of literature I read. I mean, I do love James Joyce, who I studied with Richard Ellman at Northwestern. So to me, Ulysses is really just a bracing tonic of reality, beautifully put. I just finished reading a whole bunch of Clifford Simak. He's just a Midwestern writer that I fell in love with as a science fiction writer. But again, years and years ago, I reread The Great Gatsby a lot. Because I think it's really a fine novel. Raymond Chandler is, I have to admit, I read everything he wrote multiple times. And I always go back to John Updike. And I'll tell you why I do that. When I didn't know if I should leave ministry, if I'd start writing again, I wanted so much to. I felt the inner impulse, but I thought, I don't know if I can do that. I started writing a short story that turned into one called More Than a Dream. Really good story about alien contact. And I sent the not so good story, but it was a draft. I sent it to John Updike. I got his address in Massachusetts. I said, this is who I am. What do you think? Should I quit or should I? And I still have the letter he wrote back that said, this is right up there with the best that I've been reading. Don't quit. You never forget people like that. So when I read John Updike, I mean, I can see all the peccadillos of his varied and complex life. But when you love somebody, you forgive everything, right? I mean, okay, so you did that. I still love you. And if you don't love somebody, then I'll, the minor infraction. On movies, Chinatown, Blade Runner. The original. Blade Runner. The second one was pretty good, but Blade Runner, Body Heat. Update on noir that was beautifully done. This recent movie, Nightmare Alley, is beautifully done. It's dark, but noir is dark. And so I watch TCM. I watch a lot of old noir movies just to see how they do the tropes. But Chinatown, I still think, is one of the best. Sorry, Roman Polanski, like 13-year-olds. I mean, mileage varies, right? Right. But it's still a great movie. And well, those are the ones I've watched so many times. Body Hit, I can do. Even funny things like Groundhog Day. I can do the whole, and My Dinner with Andre. I thought was definitely one of the very, very best. Yeah, there's certain movies I just go back to and watch again and again. Yep. And the corollary to that, unfortunately, is we watch Saturday Night Live every Saturday night. We record it. It takes about 10 minutes to watch the whole program because it's usually, this is terrible. Go through it. This is terrible. Then you get to Weekend Update, watch it. Then, oh, God, look at what they're doing now. And then they have singers on. And I confess, at our age, we don't get it. They sing kind of choking off everything, very, very soft. And what they're relying on is lighting and extraordinary peacock-like costumes. But they can't sing. A lot of them cannot carry a tune. And my wife and I were both old people. We say, what happened when we were asleep? So take what I advise with a grain of salt. at a certain point in life, you look back on the movies and books that were foundational for you, and you just keep returning to them. Mm-hmm. And they're building blocks of your psyche because they give you insight at a critical moment of your growth and development.
Yep. Mine, probably one of the three, well, two or three, got quite a few, but I keep going back to it. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Zierig, and the Tao and Day of Pooh, ironically.
I think mine is the Gnostic Bible.
What's that?
I think mine was the Gnostic Bible.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
There's some good stuff in there.
Yeah, really good stuff.
There I am.
That and the Book of Enoch.
Interesting. Shame we threw them out.
Yeah, right. So it was great having you on, Richard.
Great to talk to you both. I mean,
this has been epic.
Very energizing, and we'll do it again sometime. And maybe
I'll hope to see you at DEF CON this year. I've actually worn my DEF CON shirt. Last year was my first year, but I wore it for you. So
Thank you. Well, it's a community of faith. Believe me.
Absolutely. Well, I will definitely be in touch with you, and good luck with the next book. I'm gonna have to go back and read Mobius again. So I'm really excited about it. Just being able to talk to you.
All I can ask people to do is buy 10 copies, give them as gifts. Tell all your friends about it. Blah blah blah. It's terrible. I mean, you hate to be a self-marketer, right? You sound so absurd, but
I will help you with that.
My mother could do it.
I'll put it in the show notes. The link to the Amazon store so they can buy it. And it was a pleasure, and it was a complete honor to be able to talk to you and then pick your brain for an hour.
You're one of the giants, and you are one of the giantesses. So
thank you, sir.
Great conversation. Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. See you guys later.
Yeah. Bye.
All right, next up, we've got two something old segments. Both of them are from the recent Predict 2022 virtual event. We got a lot of twos today. In the first one, Victor Gamow, who's the principal developer advocate over at Kong, has a presentation titled Top API and Digital Transformation Trends in 2022. Right after Victor's presentation, we have Alice Koprivnikar, who is the senior sales engineer from Chronosphere, and Ali's presentation is titled Leveraging Observability for Competitive Edge. It's a tongue twister there, folks. Both of them are really great, worth checking out. Let's go ahead and roll them now.
Hello and welcome to Top API and Digital Trends in the Digital Transformation Trends in 2022. I'm super excited to be here at Predict 2022. My name is Victor Gamow, and I work as a developer advocate at a company named Kong. Kong is a cloud connectivity company, so that's why my cloud predictions and digital transformation trends will be somehow related to some of the things that I do with developers, plus some of the things related to application connectivity and cloud. And the first thing that I want to talk about is something that probably many of you already seen in 2021. 2021 was very notorious on some of the cloud failures. Big cloud providers experienced hour-long or maybe couple hours long outages in 2021, and it actually affected a lot of businesses. So many technology leaders, they realize that the multi-cloud strategy right now, it's not only nice to have. And we just simply cannot run a sustainable business that runs across globe without knowing what's our backup strategy or maybe our hot strategy. So enterprises are choosing that they believe to be best cloud provider for each resource. They move to cloud, or maybe it would be related to particular region or particular service that will be available in one cloud provider will not be available in another cloud provider. So we saw this coming in 2020, 2021, and I think this would be more visible in 2022. If we stay on the topic of clouds, previous decade, we noticed that many people, many organizations were moving to cloud. And while they were doing why they were in this journey of moving their stuff to the cloud, they also developed muscle that allowed them to apply the practices and techniques that they learned by running cloud providers and apply them back for certain workloads when they need to run this in private. So that's why we might see some of the more a technical savvy companies, they will start moving back to some of the private cloud technology, but using the things that they learn in cloud providers. Next is a very interesting thing that somehow appeared in end of 2020, maybe around to 2021, but rather than 2021 when the Apple released their M1 laptops to drive the revolution of would be very similar what the iPhone did for smartphones. So essentially, ARM, for some of you who don't know, that's another type of processors that might be driving some of the home automation on some people or some of the IoT devices. Raspberry Pi was very popular example of how the ARM processors came into in our regular lives. But what if we will use this not only in the consumer devices, but what if we will run some of the mission critical applications using ARM's processors? And one of the examples that we saw in 2021 was Honeycomb. It's a cloud observability company, and they shared their experience of migrating some of their mission critical event streaming platform from traditional x86 architecture to ARM architecture. And we will see this stuff more and more happening because cloud providers like Amazon, they started providing the instances based on the ARM processors that would be cheaper because they consume less electricity and they require less power and less maintenance, so they can sell them cheaper. A couple weeks ago, I saw the Oracle Cloud also provide the ARM machines with the small fee, so you can start playing around and start developing and moving your workloads to ARM instances. The COVID-19 and all these lockdowns that happened in 2019, 2020, 2021 made the enterprises to rethink how they will approach talent and how they will be hiring developers with some experience or little experience. And maybe at some point we should invest more on the tools that allow the developers catch up very quickly. And tools like low code or no code tools that allows to build applications and serverless and function as a service. Those things influence the way how the hiring start happening in the developer world. On the same sentiment, when we talking about the application development based on the Conway law, which is roughly says your information system structure will be mimic your organizational structure. And if you want to build distributed teams or distributed systems, we will building more distributed teams. The composable business, it essentially allows you to move your big monolithic thing into smaller pieces, into smaller services that can interact with each other, will be must-have. We were talking about digital transformation and a move from the legacy, the monolithic applications into Microsoft's world prior years. I think we finally here where the microservices, the must is the only way how you can deploy these distributed systems using these distributed technologies. And for that, you might need also tools available. And we'll talk about the tools in a few more seconds. So speaking about how is deploying this, we definitely see that Kubernetes is the platform where the people want to run their software. It's a platform for building platforms. If you are thinking to run a SaaS business, most likely you look into Kubernetes as a foundation for you to build your platform on top of it, distributed to execute and deploy distributed system to either private cloud or public cloud. And the tools that available should provide you like not only bare minimum, like people don't want to roll on their monitoring systems. They don't want to roll their like API gateways and some of the tools that allow them to manage microservices and manage the APIs. So those tools are expected to be a part of the Kubernetes offering. So as we saw, the Kubernetes was developing or like different distribution of Kubernetes were developed similar how many Linux distributions were developed. We will see more management tools and more the tools that allows the developer to focus on the solving business tasks rather than rolling their own things. And with explosion of many Kubernetes businesses and the businesses that established on top of like some of the open source tools, there's some different providers providing different versions of the Kubernetes. And right now, as I said, everything looks exactly like a Linux distribution 20 years ago. In 2020, in 2022, we will see many decisions based on like what kind of platforms to run and all these kind of things will be very much outsourced to development teams to decide. And like modern enterprises will be able to enable their teams to choose the platform that they want to run. So requires better management, more tools, more companies that will provide better tools, and developer tooling will be absolutely different how we look on this in 2020. So developers are right now in a very nice place, in a very nice position about what kind of tools that would be given for them to operate these complex systems. Now, for many years, the three-layer architecture where you have a database, business logic, and some sort of like a presentation layer was dominant a structure for developing applications. But with the introduction of microservices, where each service will have its own, like everything, it will have its own like a front end. Load balancers were still in the stage where they were with the three-layer architecture. They were putting in place to provide access to the system, regardless if they're using capabilities of the load balancer, like actual load balancer, or some additional features like maybe SSL termination or whatnot. So what we see, the load balancing, like old-fashioned load balancing proxy servers will go away, because essentially in many cases, when the people use those, they don't actually need this. And with technologies like a service mesh that provides the container that would be sidecar proxy that sits next to your application. The load balancing will happen on the client side. So the application would be aware about the load balancing. And if we need to run multiple other instances, the tools like a service mesh will allow to route traffic accordingly. So we predict in 3-4 years, we'll see less and less traditional load balancers, and since migration to distributed architecture and distributed the microservices will continue. So zero load balancer, all the things. But in a sense, when we're saying, okay, so there would be no load balancing, there would be more tooling, again, based that allows you to control access. And one of the tools that we're really excited about, it's called Open Policy Agent. It's a standard open source policy agent that allows to automate the process of defining and codifying traffic policies. And it saves a lot of time for developers. You don't need to go and configure your IP tables manually or configure your routers manually. So all these things will be built in the tooling, like a service mesh. Moreover, you will be able to go in a higher level of your network communication, say on the OPA policy, understand HTTP requests, and based on certain requirements on the particular policies, we will be able to allow or restrict execution on certain HTTP calls, for example. Look forward for OPA for defining policies for your systems in the future. That's going to be awesome. And last but not least, I talk a lot about the distributed systems. I talk about distributed teams. I talk about collaboration. So the API Ops, it's a new movement where the developers and enterprises, they recognized that API developers could be more efficient if they could spend less time on some routine tasks like testing or securing their code. With the API Ops, they can help achieve this by standardizing and automating some of the code testing and securing things by running this through API management platforms. And you will be able to treat your API development and deployment similar way how you're treating the code delivery using GitOps approach with the API Ops tools and the things that we develop at Kong, and we're really proud of the tools that we provide our developers to develop, test, and deliver their APIs in these platforms. I want to say thanks my colleagues at Kong, Marco and Reza, and my friend Sergey Gorov with the input of their ideas for those predictions. And with this, my name is Viktor Gamov, and as always, have a nice day.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alesh Koprivnikar, and I'm a Senior Solutions Engineer at Chronosphere. And today I'm going to be talking about leveraging observability for a competitive edge using Chronosphere. So let me first say a few words about Chronosphere as a whole. As an organization, we have founders that have been part of Uber's observability team, and there they spent a couple of years working on the technology that Chronosphere is now based on. That's M3DB. From there, we have become pretty much a global company with 3 hubs in New York City, Seattle, and Vilnius. And over the past 2.5 years, we have raised about $250 million in 3 funding rounds. And with that, we are achieving our goal of reducing observability data volumes by up to 80% for our customers and giving them unprecedented views into their infrastructure and applications while supporting growth that they experience. Now, we have customers that are as large as 7 million plus data points per second being stored in the platform and queried by, in certain cases, hundreds of users.
and thousands or tens of thousands of alerts to make sure that we enable them to control what's going on in their environment. So some of the main benefits of Chronosphere are keeping cost and data volume under control, which in how things are run today, especially while using containerization, Kubernetes, and similar approaches to running applications infrastructure, is critical. We all understand that scaling applications up happens frequently, and an observability platform definitely needs to support that way of working. Well, on the back of that, we are also open source compatible. So, for providing future-proof observability for our users and making it a lot easier to enable people who are using the platform, and to make sure that it's easier to find people with skills in the area. So we enable storing Prometheus and StatsD metrics for just for that purpose. Now, being built in a cloud-native environment or as a product, one of our main imperatives is providing scalability, unprecedented scalability to our users, meaning that we can support their workloads and their environments, even while they grow with the platform. This is becoming especially important with kind of the global move of a lot of companies towards Kubernetes, which in turn causes a huge increase in metrics traffic or what you actually need to measure, and an increase in cardinality. And with all of that, right, easily tracking a lot of data and giving engineers unprecedented access to that data, it enables them to detect and remediate issues a lot faster, which is obviously critical for companies supporting workflows with end users, so you can detect things fast and remediate them. How it all works. Well, Chronosphere is a software as a service solution. So obviously, all the data first needs to be collected from environments on the customer side, that being Prometheus, StatsD, or anything like that. And the Chronosphere collector is actually the vessel for that. The data then gets pumped into the Chronosphere backend, where we have an aggregation layer that enables you to potentially filter, drop less valuable data, or aggregate data, downsample data for you to have to only store the things that are really critically important in a database that is then queryable by everyone at any point in time at a high level of performance. One of the examples of doing this is our user DoorDash. So they had challenges on their observability team by scaling their existing solution while using their current solution. Anyhow, by implementing Chronosphere, they were able to implement an open source approach for their observability or metrics data, and provide a high level of scalability and performance. And they now have also an ability to understand where their data is coming from, so on the read and write side of things, and spend less time worrying about their observability platform and solving situations that arise while running a product that is used by essentially millions of people out there every day. And now we also obviously want to show you the platform. So we're going to step into a quick demo. What I'm going to show you now is a quick use case of how a user of Chronosphere would go through the product to some of the key things that we see our users solving with the product. So first of all, when measuring things, what you usually want to do with them is either view them to understand them or alert on them. And in this case, we have an alert that's right now triggering into Slack, which does happen. We also have integrations into plethora of other products out there, or we simply enable you to call a webhook. Now in this case, we have an alert that says there's a metrics volume increase. Well, it's an interesting thing to alert on, right? Since we generally what you alert on is, service times, memory usage, restarts, things like that. Well, obviously we can do that, but what we're trying to show you here is something that's actually difficult to do. So the platform itself enables you to cost account on the volume of data based on a label value, meaning you can cost account on a team, on a service, on a BU. So you can understand how much an application, service, or a team, what their data production is, and if it's growing and so on. Now, in this case, we see that a certain team actually had an increase in how much data they were producing, which is not necessarily a problem. But if, let's say, a team says, well, we need this many data points per second, or this much volume of data stored, and then all of a sudden they go 5x or 10x, it is definitely something that, if we are the team running the observability platform, we probably want to keep an eye on that. Why is that important? Well, maybe they scaled up, and that's perfectly fine, and we need to figure out ways to store this data. Maybe there's something went wrong and they essentially exploded their cardinality or something like that. And that is something that in most other platforms you could incur charges and so on. Now, Chronosphere is a little bit different, right? We want to give you control over this data and help you understand when that happens, give you levers that you can pull to kind of keep things in line. Now, to do that, from this alert, right, we're going to jump into a usage dashboard. So this usage dashboard is going to show me at any point in time how much data is coming into the platform, how much data are we storing, and then how much, what kind of volume of data is coming in on a per team basis, right? If we look at our team C that triggered the alert before, we see that they had a couple of increases in data over the last couple of hours, honestly. So this is definitely something that is not expected, right? And we obviously want to understand. Now, looking at these dashboards, maybe one kind of side point to make. If you're familiar with dashboarding products out there, you'll see that this is Grafana essentially, right? So we do enable you to import community build Grafana dashboards for Grafana dashboards you already have in your current environment, and also your alerting that is Prometheus compatible and so on. So it makes it very easy to kind of get into the Chronosphere product. Now, moving back from this, right, if this team that we're looking at here has increases in data and so on, how do we understand what that data is? Well, to do that, if you kind of think back to our aggregation layer or control plane, we actually enable you to look at the data live as it's coming into the platform. To do that, we have a part of the product called the profiler. So why is that interesting? Well, the profiler is actually going to show you how many data points of each metric, of each dimension of the metric is actually coming in. And now here, if I say, well, can you just show me the data that's coming in from Team C? So I can understand how many metrics are they sending in, what kind of cardinality is, like, does each of the labels of this metrics have, so I can rapidly understand if a team had an explosion of volume, where is that actually coming from? Is this coming from an increase in scale for the number of instances that they're running, if we are in a containerized world, or is this maybe them just putting some sort of value in the label that has a high level of cardinality, and that's exploding the data volume? Now, with this understanding, we can then take further steps to have even more control of what's happening with this data. If this is a mistake, we obviously want to kind of take a step back, right, and not ingest all this data and store all this data. So we can go back to the team and say, hey, can you roll back the version of software you deployed or something like that? But with Chronosphere, right, we can actually, because that might take some time, but with Chronosphere, we actually have ways of controlling that in the product itself. So to do that, what I can do is we have something called drop rules that we apply on our control plane. Essentially, if a certain metric coming from our team C for service foo is, for instance, exploding, we can actually drop that data on ingest and not store it, and therefore not pay for it, since something's wrong with it. And we can do that in 30 seconds here versus going back and redeploying the software. Now, obviously, if this would be a situation where the team is creating some sort of new data set that needs to be kept, but maybe does not need such a high level of resolution, well, we then have another layer, it's called aggregation rules, where we can actually say, well, for this data point that's coming in, remove cardinality from it, but keep the data, sum it up or average it out so that we are not losing visibility, we're only reducing the data volume, which becomes critically important, right? Once you have a situation where your environment scales up tremendously and you need to keep the visibility, but not break the proverbial bank. Okay. Now, for something, for a comparison of how those aggregation rules actually look in practice, right? Let me give you an example. If you have a fairly large environment, let's say 10,000 of pods, and one of the things that is interesting on a per pod basis is, for instance, CPU, right? But if we, for each pod, store a bunch of other dimensions, querying that over a long period of time can be extremely difficult or extremely expensive or slow. And with the aggregation tier, what we enable you to do is to remove cardinality from the data. And on the left-hand side, we have an aggregated CPU metric where that data was essentially sampled down. And we see that to look at the CPU over 4 different teams, we are only querying 18,000 different metrics. While if we query these raw metrics, that number is significantly higher, like 6 times higher. Now, doing this over 12 hours with the aggregated metrics is actually relatively fast. It's like 6 seconds. With the raw metrics, that actually takes a lot more time. Like in this case, 15 seconds, and we're only doing 12 hours. Now, these comparisons become really interesting if you do day by day or maybe even week over week. Doing something like that on large environments without aggregation is extremely difficult, if not impossible. So this is just a few different examples of how Chronosphere can, address certain challenges that people in this space hit. And we'd love to show you more if obviously there's interest on your end. Thank you very much. So this was a brief demo of Chronosphere. If you are interested in the platform, would love to know more. Here's a few ways to get in touch with us. And thank you very much for your time. And I believe we take questions at the end of this. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Happy Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the headlines. First up on DevOps.com is an article about how DevSecOps teams can level up their skills. DevSecOps introduces a more intentional culture wherein security by design principles are baked into the software development process early on. The aim is to have security-enabled development not stall and slow down the software delivery lifecycle. So years later, how is DevSecOps doing? Has it achieved this ideal? Well, unfortunately, no. Most large companies still have real problems with application security, and software dependency providence is constantly in question. Log4j and Spring4Shell are perfect examples. So how should DevSecOps teams respond to the seemingly endless barrage of new vulnerabilities and attacks? This article offers 6 general ways teams can increase their security posture. And speaking of DevSecOps, we have an article about the rising demand for DevSecOps talent. The global DevSecOps market is anticipated to register a compound annual growth rate of 32.2% over the next few years, and revenue is projected to grow to $23.42 billion US in 2028. That is up from $2.55 billion in 2020. No wonder the number of job postings for DevSecOps is rising. Those who are already well-versed in DevOps and who have a security background will have an advantage over others in this field when looking to get hired. However, it is not just about the tools and technologies. There's a lot more to DevSecOps than that. It is also about culture and new ways of working. It's about automating the security process and making security a part of the continuous delivery pipeline. This article delves into what is inspiring top business leaders to invest in DevSecOps and how acquiring these skills will help DevOps and software engineers in their career. We also look at ways in which organizations can nurture a developer-centric culture. Built on the foundation of engineering culture and dedicated to empowering engineers, the DevOps culture is intertwined with the concept of continuous delivery and gives developers the responsibility and ability to deploy their products end to end. This means developers can move fast and work independently. While DevOps usually refers to the operational aspects of a software development lifecycle, it can be beneficial to take it a step further. In a truly developer-centric culture, the engineer is involved in the entire life cycle of software, from inception and product and QA all the way to operating it in production. However, to thrive, this culture needs an entire organization's support. Being involved does not necessarily mean being fully responsible. Product managers are responsible for the product, but it's essential that the engineers are involved in the product definition. This goes for all aspects of the product development lifecycle, where engineers need to be involved in everything. There are effective ways leadership can support a developer-centric culture. The more this culture is embraced, the more successful a company's and the industry's engineers will be. This article offers up a number of ways organizations can effectively support DevOps and build and sustain a developer-centric culture. All right, over on Container Journal, we have an article that offers 5 best practices for cloud-native permissions. Cloud-native and microservices-based products are complex, and so is building access control and managing permissions for these products. And it's only getting worse with each pull request. Most developers end up building authorization or access control for their products multiple times, forced to refactor with each new customer, product, or security demand. This article looks at the unique challenges that building cloud-native permissions poses and covers the 5 best practices for building them that can save developers a lot of hassle. With complexity on the rise and a constant stream of customer and security demands, building a product's access control in a way that will be ready for the future and won't require heavy refactors or rewrites is critical. Creating a separate microservice for authorization, designing it to be event-driven, providing controls and interfaces to various stakeholders and customers, and using GitOps allows developers to create a product that is as future-proof as possible and prevents them from having to rebuild the authorization layer over and over and over again, no matter the requirements. On Security Boulevard is an article that takes a look at the role of GitOps in application security. GitOps is a set of practices for managing infrastructure and application deployment using Git version control systems. GitOps uses a Git repository as a single source of truth for declarative configuration of both infrastructure and applications. In a GitOps development process, Git repositories contain the entire system state, so teams can easily view and audit changes to system state. Built on the developer experience, GitOps empowers teams to manage their infrastructure using the same tools and processes they use when coding. It supports a wide variety of tools, allowing teams to leverage their existing CI/CD toolchain. GitOps enables organizations to improve their overall cloud security posture. It helps DevOps teams to meet audit requirements, shift security left, achieve faster response times, and improve customer confidence. This article dives deep into the benefits of GitOps as it relates to application security. With GitOps, it is instantly clear who modified a cluster and why, and what security concerns exist in the current deployment. GitOps can prevent breaches through a separation of concerns between CI and CD processes. If and when breaches do happen, it enables rapid rollback to a previous secure state, or roll forward to a new patched version of Kubernetes applications. And finally, we have an article about establishing a root of trust in embedded Linux and IoT. With IoT, 5G, and embedded devices becoming a larger part of everyone's daily lives, security, and more important, trust in our technology, is on everyone's minds. Embedded devices don't have a good security track record. The last several years saw a significant number of high-profile hacks that could prevent people from widely accepting IoT into their homes. The proliferation of hacks and the threat to basic infrastructure resulted in a move toward regulating the security of critical software. Specifically, Executive Order 14082 in the United States drew up a list of security practices, including the inclusion of a software bill of materials with every application run by the U.S. federal government. The National Institute of Standards and Technology is also creating reference architectures and templates for application security as a result of the executive order. Regulation is coming to software security that will likely impact every company that produces code or sells products running on code. When it comes to securing the software supply chain on embedded devices, regulation and SBOMs are only a small part of the story. From a developer and operator point of view, the more important issue is knowing what you are running and deploying to are from trusted sources and whether the attack surface is minimized. Most importantly, in the event of a malware breach, you also must mitigate, isolate, and prevent any further damage to your network. This article offers up some steps organizations should consider to better secure and create trust with IoT devices and embedded Linux. Good stuff. All right, that's it for today's headlines. It was a long one today. Please check back with me on Thursday when I will have a new batch of headlines for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day. And please, whatever you do, stay safe.
CISO Talk. To hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Susan St. Clair, who is the Director of Product Management over at WhiteSource. Susan, thank you so much for taking a couple minutes and chatting with me today. Do appreciate it.
Definitely my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
All right, great. Well, I know WhiteSource. We know WhiteSource very well here at Techstrong and Techstrong TV and DevOps.com and all of the sites. You guys are really, really heavily into open source security. And obviously that is a very, very much a hot button topic these days. We've heard so many things regarding open source security and mitigating threat vulnerabilities in open source software. And one of the things that I wanted to discuss with you today are some of the findings from the WhiteSource Npm Threat Report and how that kind of fits into the whole conversation. And then maybe we can talk a little bit about what organizations can do to better protect their open source software and mitigate some of the security risks that exist today. So first, let's talk about the NPM Threat Report. Can you kind of give me an overview of what you guys took a look at and some of the findings?
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely. I think this is, at least for me as a, you know, I don't want to use the word practitioner because I think there are definitely people more qualified to use that terminology. But, as somebody in the industry who's been in the industry, a couple of years at this point, I think it is truly interesting to look at the report. The report really looked at the Npm registry. So as you and our listeners probably already are aware, JavaScript is a hugely popular language that's used in a lot of websites. And Npm is one of the most common place to get JavaScript libraries, open source. So we basically took a look at that particular registry, monitored it for about 6 months. And, and when we were monitoring it, we were looking for not vulnerable libraries because, that's kind of like, oh, been there, done that, old news, in the open source security world. But we really wanted to take a look at it from a supply chain, kind of malicious supply chain point of view. So we took a look at it over the last 6 months and then, said like, okay, over that, like how many of them are actively malicious versus just vulnerable. So, and within that sample size, what are they doing, right? Are they stealing data? Are they just watching, waiting for their opportunity? Are they doing this? Are they doing that? So some very interesting, I think, data points came out of that monitoring exercise that we did earlier in the year.
So can you share some of those results? Because it sounds like there's some juicy stuff in there.
Yeah, no, for sure. So first off, I knew that Npm was very, very popular, very, very common. I don't know that I realized quite how popular it was. I think that was kind of the first interesting bit. Around 32,000 libraries on average uploaded to Npm, right? Insane.
That's a lot.
And then, so we looked at that, and then, for the time that we were monitoring it, roughly 1,300 malicious, not vulnerable, but we are actively going after something with these open source libraries, were detected.
13,000.
1,300.
1,300. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my
it's
God.
Still a lot, but
that is a lot, but that's a little more manageable. But were these, so these were malicious in nature. So this was not a mistake. These were actively, filled with bad code or something that was, some sort of virus or ransomware or something that was going to basically mess somebody up. So
exactly.
So what were these malicious packages? What did they contain?
Yeah. So again, I think when we kind of spec'd it out and, what are they doing? What's the targets? I know there's been some studies over in Europe, most of the supply chain attacks have been really focused on, data stealing, right? For use elsewhere. And, that was some of the similar sort of trends that we saw out of our exercise as well. So, roughly, the 15%, 14%, we're looking to actually steal credentials, right? So they can have access to other environments. But most of them, the bulk of them were just monitoring. So again, we know from other open source kind of exploits or whether it's a supply chain attack or something else, that the behavior of a lot of these malicious actors, they kind of get into your environment and then they hang out and then they just kind of watch and gather and until they kind of take it to the next. So they could be in your environment for potentially years, right, before they actually act upon that data. So kind of scary.
That is scary. And so if the majority of them are right now just actively monitoring, is there another step that they have to take then to go beyond monitoring into actually doing damage, whether it's stealing data or installing a ransomware or some other type of malware? Because it seems to me that monitoring is one thing, but
sure,
doing something is a completely different action.
Sure. So then the focus of that, or the purpose of that monitoring, right? It's like reconnaissance, right? So like, what can I get? So again, depending on the malicious actor, you're right. They would take it to the next step. So we're going to install something, ransomware, some sort of Trojan, right? That will take down your critical assets, or we're going to suck that user data, that customer data maybe, and we're going to sell it out on the dark web or something like that. So this is just really kind of the first stage of I think a multi-pronged, malicious exercise over time.
And do you guys have any indication of how long these malicious packages have been in the NPM? I guess it's a repository, or do you have any idea? I mean, are they relatively recent, or have they kind of been sitting around for a little while? And bad luck to those who actually pick it up.
Right. So most of the ones, again, I think it's a pretty active community. So typically these malicious libraries don't hang around a long time. But one of the things that WaySource does as part of just who we are is that, certainly we were monitoring and we're like, oh, what's up there and how many are we seeing? But, we believe in being part of the open source community. So we're also reporting, these malicious actors, these malicious libraries up to NPM themselves, right? So the maintainers of that registry, we work with them and others in the industry to get them off, right? Okay. So they're not a danger to the larger community.
So is this the first time you guys have done this NPM Threat Report, or is this an annual thing for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. It is the first time that we've done this. And I think part of it, again, is that certainly open source has been a big part of applications, for a long time, but it continues to grow. There's also the continuing prevalence of open source supply chain attacks that we've seen kind of over the last, say, couple of years. So it is the first time. I have high hopes that we will continue to do this, because I think this provides a lot of insight and value.
Yeah, I would agree, because I mean, we've heard from a couple different companies about monitoring other repos, such as Git repos and things of that nature. NPM less so. So I think you guys are really doing a great service to the community and the open source community, and specific to to make sure that the code that is available in these NPM registries are safe for organizations to use. And I'm curious, and I don't know if you have any indication one way or the other. Do you see this as an increase in the number of kind of bad NPM, I guess malicious code in the NPM registries? I mean, have you seen an increase, or is it something that has remained steady over the last couple of years?
Yeah. So I think just generally speaking, not just NPM, although obviously that was the focus of the report and whatnot, but generally speaking, I think we've seen an uptick in this type of behavior. Certainly NPM, I think, is a target because of the nature of the registry. Like we talked, or what we were saying just a second ago, about it being hugely popular, right? The increase of open source in applications, like all these kind of factors kind of leading in. But this type of activity where, again, these libraries aren't just vulnerable, somebody made a mistake, this and that, but they're like actively trying to attack you. I think this trend has been increasing, and I think it will continue to increase, because there's been some very high profile sort of mainstream media attention to these sort of things. So they know that it works, right? Why would they stop?
And do you have a sense of who's actually doing this these days? I mean, are these kind of just for-profit hackers, or are we actually talking about nation-state attacks, or something altogether different?
Yeah, again, I think some of the other studies they're coming out. Again, there was one by EINSA. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, earlier in the year, that really kind of looked at supply chain attacks. And again, it is kind of a wide spectrum. Certainly you kind of see the individuals, maybe, see what they can do. Yeah. But it has, like, again, there are nation states actively participating in this, certainly criminal organizations. Again, it's working. Why would they not? So again, maybe the same sort of behavior that we're seeing in other sort of malicious attacks elsewhere within application security.
Unfortunately, that's kind of like God, I hate to say it, but it's like a car accident. I mean, you don't really want to know what's going on, but you kind of can't look away sometimes. Yeah. And open source security seems to be the gift that keeps on giving when it comes to cybersecurity threats. And it's always fascinating to hear the different ways that hackers are actually exploiting the code through either taking advantage of vulnerabilities or actually inserting malware in the code. They've gotten so much smarter and more thoughtful in how they approach this. What do you think? What do you think we can do? We, meaning organizations. What do you think that we're able? How can we keep up? Because it seems like it's never ending.
Right. And, I kind of feel like, well, what can we do? Like, I go to my, gym and I go to my doctor. So the holidays were a little rough. What can I do? It's the same sort of thing. Eat, sleep, maybe think beverage choices. So I think with open source or with security in general, it's a similar sort of thing. So first you have to you have to have a thoughtful approach. So I can't just grab like open source, libraries willy-nilly from the wild, wild west internet, look into having some sort of like internal registry where this is my safe version, my good version, whatever you want to call it. So start to implement those processes. Certainly, I think what we're seeing in terms of the industry, White Source has a solution for this, is that, again, here we'll help you. We're scanning, again, like part of this report, we're scanning NPM, we're seeing these libraries, we know who they are. So let us help you automatically block them and like stop them from even coming into your organization. So look for ways that you can automatically do things. So rather than just say, do what I tell you, and don't worry about releasing that application on time and you're not sure what to do, actually giving tools to the organizations to help automate things, detect, block, report, all those good things. So I do think the industry has come a long way with regards to that, rather than just saying, do what I say. But certainly, there's work to be done as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so much attention has been paid to it over the last, especially 2 years or so.
Yeah,
we've learned a lot when it comes to cybersecurity and kind of what not to do. So I think organizations are a lot more aware of the issues that exist, and part two of that is actually doing something about it. So I think a lot of organizations are kind of at part two right now, and we've got a long way to go for sure. But it's good to know that there is that heightened level of awareness all around, and certainly threat reports such as the Npm report that you guys did certainly can hurt. They can help improve the awareness profile even higher. So thank you very much for doing that. If folks want to take a look at that Npm threat report, is that freely available on the White Source website?
It is. Download, take a look. Again, it's not too heavy reading. It's not 20 pages or anything, but it's definitely got some good stuff in there.
All right. Great. Well, Susan, thank you so much for walking me through it and discussing open source security, NPM registries, and cybersecurity in general. It's always, like I said before, it seems to be the gift that keeps on giving. So I do appreciate your time and your expertise, and hopefully we'll have you back on another Techstrong TV interview to talk to you about some other open source security issues.
Right. No, it's been great. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Avi Shua, who is the CEO and co-founder of Orca Security, and certainly no stranger to Techstrong TV. Avi, thank you so much for joining me today. Really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Great. So, Avi, I want to talk to you a little bit about Orca Security's recent Cloud Security Alert Fatigue Report, which is a mouthful, just the title alone, but it's certainly a topic that I'm sure a lot of organizations are grappling with as they adopt multi-cloud environments and just so many things happening in the cloud these days. So can you kind of walk me through, first of all, what you guys wanted to accomplish with the Cloud Security Alert Fatigue Report, and how you guys came about actually even just the idea of having the report in general?
So I'm a big believer that one of the main issues that we have in security is that we have great tools, but due to the fact that they are many times more correct than smart, they are not being utilized. And they are sharing too many items, showing too many alerts, and at the end of the day, organizations are breached because it can't be humanly manageable. And we wanted to grasp the size of the problem and whether it's our belief or organizations see it the same. And we got some really interesting results out of that. Besides, I'd say, the more obvious ones that we see that the vast majority of the organization having hundreds, if not thousands of new alerts per day, and more than half believe that they miss critical alerts due to that. We also say that many people say that they believe the tools are accurate. More than 95% of the organization believe that the tools are accurate, while almost half believe that 40% of the alerts are false positive. So I think we got some very interesting results in it.
It sounds really interesting, and it's I feel like I'm having kind of flashbacks to the older days of when folks had to go on pager duty and be on alert for networking and application outages or service outages, and the number of alerts that came up just from that. And so they went through alert fatigue with that as well. So now it's seems like it's all kind of shifting up to the cloud. So is this the first year that you guys have done this cloud security alert fatigue report?
Yes, it's the first one, and we plan to continue that.
Okay, great. So tell us a little bit about you've given us kind of a hint at some of the survey results, but what were some of the results that really surprised you?
The one result that actually surprised me is that there's two inputs that are essentially contradicting. And I think that only by digging very deep, you understand that they are not really contradicting. So we saw 43% of the respondents says that more than 40% of the alerts are false positive. This is a huge amount. Yet 95%, virtually everyone, says they are confident or very confident in the accuracy of the security tools. So how can it live together? How comes that 40% believe that 40% are false positive, yet the vast majority of them believe that the tools are very accurate?
Well, so did you figure it out? I mean, have you guys come up with a solution there or a reason why it is this way?
So yes, in fact, what I believe the main reason for that, after having some discussion, is the fact that technically, when people say false positive, they mean two different things. One thing is the tool is not doing the job that it was designed to do. It's telling you have this vulnerability and you don't have this vulnerability. You have this misconfiguration, you don't have. And definitely there are false positive, but this is not the most common issue. The most common issue is that it's technically correct, but you don't care because it doesn't have any business impact to you. And some people call it false positive, although you may assume that technically it's not a false positive, but from the business point of view, it's a false positive because yes, you're vulnerable, but there's no access to that. There's a misconfiguration, but there's nothing in the service, so you don't care. And I think that this is the main difference that we see. The tools are mostly technically right. They're giving vulnerabilities, they're giving you misconfiguration, they're giving you identity issues, etc. But the vast majority of these items have absolutely no business impact. And therefore, you end up with thousands of critical alerts, among them probably one or two that you really needed to handle.
So it sounds like there's not enough intelligence behind these alerts or the applications that are triggering these alerts, because if there was, then maybe they could kind of prioritize the alerts that come through and say, well, this is a severe priority. This really needs to be taken care of before this kind of minor priority alert. So is that part of the issue here? Is we just don't have enough intelligence behind these alerts to actively understand where the threats are or where the priority needs to be?
So I believe that intelligence is a right word, but I'll use something more accurate. I believe the main problem is context.
Okay.
Context and the fact that we use siloed tools. And let me give a concrete example.
Sure.
Let's say that you buy the world's best vulnerability management tool and you give you a list of 1,000 vulnerabilities and you prioritize them from the most severe vulnerability to the least severe one. You do the same for misconfiguration, the same for identity, the same for data. Then you start enumerating and you try to use tons of intelligence coming from external feeds, community, etc. Which vulnerabilities are the most important? This will fail. And the reason it will fail is because this doesn't take into consideration your organization. For example, this might be let me use an analogy. If I'll go to technology, it's like someone coming to your office and telling you, I found the worst security risk in the organization. It's the lock, which is very easy to pick. And based on our intelligence, this is the lock that is most commonly used lock and most commonly picked locked. And then you go and you see that it's a lock to a cleaning supply cabinet, that there is nothing valuable inside and sits inside a secured perimeter. So technically, yes, this is the most easy to pick lock in your organization, but you couldn't care less business-wise. There's nothing valuable and no one can access that. And this is the mistake that we do when we take this siloed approach. We go for tools that find a lot of locks, but they don't see where they are in the organization. And as long as we use siloed approach, the practitioners will need to connect them. I'm a big believer that this is the main reason, that we are simply not looking at it in context. Your risk is a combination of exposure, how easy to pick the lock, and what's behind it. And only when you look at it recursively, you can actually see which attack paths are interesting and which are just best practices that you need to handle, but they might not be critical.
That's interesting. So on average, did you guys get any stats for the report on how many alert tools or how many tools organizations are currently using that are contributing to this security alert fatigue?
Definitely. We found that more than half, in fact, 57% of the organization have more than 5 cloud security tools that they use.
Wow.
And it is a lot.
Yeah. It is, and I guess it really depends on their applications and the workloads that they're running on their clouds, and so exactly what they're using the clouds for. But does that seem like a high number to you when you take into consideration everything that organizations are using the cloud for these days?
It is definitely a very high number, in my opinion. I think that it's extremely hard to make sense out of different tools that each one of them see only part of the puzzle, and to try to expect humans to connect these dots.
So what can organizations do then? I mean, apart from just like throwing away all of their cloud security tools and starting from scratch, is there a way that they can kind of harness a lot of these alerts that they're getting these days and kind of find some order in the chaos?
In my opinion, the main thing that organizations that are looking for a tool should do is not look to buy security by the kilo. In fact, tools that are providing more alerts are usually less valuable than ones that provide more concise ones. You need to be able to look at the entire data holistically in the same database, in the same view, to understand who can access this resource, what's the risks in it. If this resource is accessed, what does the attacker get? He gets access to this data. Does he get ability to assume trust that allows access into a single asset? And to be able to understand that, this is the only way that you can actually manage risk in mass. Because otherwise, you are going to handle a 7-digit number of alerts for a mid-sized organization, and then you end up to trying to go on percentages and metrics of improvement that doesn't really correlate to risks. If you don't really look at it in a contextualized point of view, you might reduce 90% of the alerts, but it might have a very small impact on risk. In a contextual view, you might be able to close 10 things that will reduce 90% of the risk. So I think that we cannot humanly manage the amount of data that exists in the cloud, and we shouldn't try to. We should try to focus on how to see contextualized view and not just many more alerts in the environment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So were there any other findings in the survey that really surprised you?
I think the fact that organizations understand that they miss critical alerts on the weekly or daily basis definitely shocked me. And the fact that we have organizations that believe that there's more than half of the organizations that believe that half of the workforce is spent prioritizing alerts. 60% of the organization says that they had employees leaving due to alert fatigue in the organization. So I think this is something that we definitely need as an industry to see how we mature beyond. Yes, we have security tools, it creates alerts, that's great. To our security tools can actually support the business and focus on what will reduce the risk and not how we can be correct and issue more and more alerts that nobody will handle.
Wow, that actually surprises me also, that high number of employees that are leaving because of alert fatigue. And it seems like it is a solution. I mean, it is a problem that does demand a solution, and and I think if it's approached thoughtfully, we probably could get to a very reasonable solution and a very workable solution. So what where can organizations kind of move forward with this level of understanding? Adding context to these alerts obviously is a very huge part of the equation. But are there other things that organizations can do with respect to alert fatigue and helping their IT teams recognize and understand which are the threats that they really do need to take action against, and which ones are the ones that are, like to your point, the broom closet alerts, where picking the lock in the broom closet or a supply closet doesn't really make a difference in the day-to-day operations of the organization.
So I'd say both the context and making sure that you understand where your crown jewels are. What's important to the business? At the end of the day, there might be a situation that you have an environment that can be breached that you don't really care. Or you care but dramatically less. It's a lab machine in a segregated environment with no trust. So yes, you probably want it not to be breached, but it's not a top priority as a server that have access to all of your customer data or to your intellectual or to your source code or to anything else. And I really think that a maturing security organization should work with the business to map the crown jewels and prioritize any attack paths that can reach these crown jewels, and not just to go by, okay, this is the amount of bytes at risk. Not all bytes are created equal.
Sounds like a very, very fascinating report. And I imagine there are a lot more results that we could kind of dive into. But if folks are interested in taking a look for themselves, is the report freely available on the Orca Security website?
Definitely. Just go to go.orca.security/alerts, and you can see the report in our website.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Avi, thank you so much for taking a couple minutes and talking with me about the report, some of the findings. We'll have you back next year so we can talk about an updated version of the security alert fatigue report. As I understand, hopefully you're going to be doing this again next year.
Thank you so much, and let's hope the numbers will be lower.
Yeah, let's hope. Let's hope indeed. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned. Hey, everybody. Happy Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the webinars preview. I always tell you, we have so many great webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. I got 3 of them here that are happening this week, so please do mark your calendar and join us. The first one is called 2022 Container Security Trends Expert Panel Livestream. This one is happening Wednesday, April 20th. That's tomorrow, folks, at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This is sponsored by Snyk. The cloud is where applications run today, but the cloud itself is software managed and run with code such as infrastructure as code, Kubernetes, and Helm configs and Docker files. Securing your cloud can and should follow much the same model as the security of the apps you're running in the cloud. So in this webinar, Techstrong research analysts will share some new research on securing cloud environments, containers, and the need for greater visibility and collaboration between engineers, operations, and security teams. In addition, a subject matter expert from Snyk will discuss challenges and successes observed from teams applying developer-first security principles to their cloud-native infrastructures. It's going to be a good one, folks. You definitely want to check it out. All right, the second one is called Building High-Performing DevOps Teams. This one is happening Wednesday, also April 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This is one of our DevOps Unbound panel discussions sponsored by Tricentis. To improve software delivery performance, the first thing organizations need to do is improve their DevOps team's expertise. DevOps doesn't deliver code by itself. It takes a great team to do it. So how can we help our DevOps team become high performers and foster innovation? What makes an effective DevOps team? And what does the future hold for DevOps engineers? This panel of experts will discuss the role of DevOps, the demand for DevOps engineers, and the main principles and practices that DevOps teams should apply to achieve high performance. The third and final webinar I want to let you know about today is called Getting HashiCorp Terraform into Production. This one is happening Thursday, April 21st at 1 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. This one is sponsored by AWS and HashiCorp. When starting their migration journey, many small teams adopt Terraform open source software to provision their clouds using infrastructure as code. As teams expand, organizational challenges can arise around collaboration, security, compliance, and governance. This webinar discusses the benefits of that Terraform Cloud offers customers who are considering Terraform as the standard workflow to provision and manage infrastructure in their organization. Good one. All right, that's it for the webinar's preview. I'll be back on Thursday with a brand new one for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe. All right, and we are back. Rounding out today's Techstrong TV broadcast, we have The View with Vizard. In this one, Mike Vizard is speaking with Ronak Raman, who is a developer relations manager at Quali. They discuss developer burnout and why minimizing developer burnout has become a key performance indicator for DevOps teams. It's a great conversation. Please do check it out. Let's roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Ronak Raman, who is head of developer relations for Quali, and we're going to be talking about developer burnout as it relates to infrastructure as code. And Ronak, my first question is to you is, we gave all these developers these wonderful infrastructure as code tools. They go do these things. How can there be burnout? Because, you know, they're supposed to be simple and easy, and IT operations guys got out of the way.
Yeah, I see that. Well, Mike, I'm a parent, so some of my analogies might be parent-based, and I've also been a tech worker for 2 decades, so I'm going to mix and mash some of these analogies. But I gave my son a pocket knife, when he was younger, and I realized you have to be that has to be supervised. There have to be guardrails when playing with a new toy, like IAC tools, infrastructure as code tools, and 2 things at play here. Okay, so the tools are great, and they automate infrastructure, and they're good at what they do, like Terraform, Helm, all that's great. But without guardrails, there are conflicting interests. I want to move fast, but I also, as the organization, I care about my security, I care about reputation, and I care about escaping defects. And so some of those things clash with moving fast. You could have Terraform scripts being written by developers that just really care about getting their product and their features out to the public, and might miss security concerns. There are also governance concerns, leaving environments and infrastructure out there dangling in the wind, gathering costs. So I think it's actually exacerbated the problem.
Do you think that's leading to more turnover for developers, or are we seeing developers kind of quit and maybe go do something else? I mean, what's the ultimate impact?
Well, the ultimate impact here, if I step back, I believe this is going to impact our ability to get software out faster. Backing up, we're in the midst of corporations digitizing, right? Their whole pipeline moving to the cloud. And what you'll have is developer burnout is sort of built into the model right now. And what we will see is not just people leaving and saying, hey, I'm going to go someplace else. I do see some, especially during COVID time, people deciding, oh, well, I don't have to do this at all. But I see that's a very rare occurrence. What I see more is people leave to someplace that can do these things, that where I'm a developer and I'm sort of, as a developer, being a former developer myself, I saw myself as an artist. I'm creating something cool and I'm trying to get it out there. And if you think about the artist's life, dealing with their art and their patron, all the other stuff in life gets in the way. And dealing with DevOps, centralized DevOps organizations, for example, to get my infrastructure out just so that I can have a place to display my art, can be soul crushing. So the first thing I'll do, if I be honest, is, I'll try to work through my environment. And if I see that there's no way for me to create my art, I'm going to go look around for a patron where some of these roadblocks don't exist.
Do you think this therefore relates to my ability to recruit development talent, or developers sitting there saying, all things being equal, I'm making a nice piece of coin somewhere else, and now it's just basically who's going to make it easier for do my art, or who's going to take all these headaches out of my way that I'm finding somewhat stressful?
So it's a super great question. I even have an example of that. So, and I'm hoping, I think every single developer, actually every single tech worker that I have spoke to in the last 2 years, including coworkers and people I'm just interviewing, voice of the customer and whatnot, every single one of them agreed that salary in the tech field has not been an issue. When we had pandemic, some of my colleagues have seen, a 50% increase easily, in their salary. So all things being equal, and if you take money off of the, off the levels of concern, it's really going to be where can I create? Where can I be impactful? I don't care about money anymore. And I've always thought money is something you just don't want to worry about. You're already in trouble when you're worrying about money. So I in my mind, I consider that sort of table stakes. And I'll give you an example. I got a recruitment call myself, And, these little things make a difference. Asked what kind of source control do they use? I was thinking what flavor of, for instance, Git, maybe GitHub, Bitbucket or whatnot. And they said, well, actually, we're using Subversion. And for me, that was just pretty much the find a polite exit to the call. I mean, Subversion. That's going to be very hard to recruit, and it just money doesn't even. That's not even. We're not at that concern yet when you're working with something like that. So if I hear, I'll listen to things like, do we have a centralized DevOps, organization? Okay, and what's the relationship? How do I, from when I commit my code, how does it get through that pipeline? And to avoid the burnouts, we want to take all the toil out of it. It should be a joy. That's what the promise of technology was for, right? When I say that, I picture for those in the statesides, I picture the Jetsons, sort of, a Jetsons type of lifestyle. We haven't created that promise yet, but it's all about removing that toil, and I'll find a place that does that if I can't find it where I'm at. And so I think if I were organizations, and I do see them taking it very, very seriously, I would pay attention to that. And money's not going to solve that problem.
Do you think it's becoming the job of the DevOps engineering team to essentially deliver a better developer experience? And are they going to get measured on that? And how would one actually think about measuring that?
I think that it has fallen on DevOps organizations, and in all of the, especially I'll speak more of centralized DevOps here. When there are too few folks to take the incoming requests, because developers really are looking for a removal of barriers. You're not a hero providing infrastructure, and DevOps only gets DevOps teams usually only get recognized in the wrong way when things break, or my life in IT. I would always, there's an ongoing joke. It's like, we only get noticed when things go wrong. Okay, so really we need to just be providing as DevOps self-service abilities and be a broker between the organization's need for guardrails and order and cost control and all the things that organizations care about, while balancing also the ability for developers to move as fast as possible, commit their code as fast as possible.
One of the issues we are having, though, is we give these developers tools to empower them, and then we turn around and there's all these misconfigurations everywhere, and things are a little bit of a mess, shall we say? So how do we kind of balance that, using your analogy of letting the kids go play, but we need some guardrails. So how do we kind of get to that kind of balance?
Yeah. Okay. So, so much to say on this, especially since I'm on a team that sort of specializes in this area. Okay, let's just first, say what we all know out loud. The organization have legitimate interests, and developers have legitimate interests, and really there are things in common. We both want to get our software out as fast as possible, and that's the name of the game. Features out, and especially product-led growth. You want to lead with your product. Okay, so that's the common interest, but developers want to create those features, as fast as possible, and organizations want that too. But they have to have their guardrails, to protect the business, keep costs down, make sure access is limited to those who need it. You don't want to give the keys to your cloud to just anyone. So I'm looking for tools as a developer in my software pipeline, really, that let me self-service everything I need. And ideally, those would be safe for the organization. The tools, the guardrails are built in. So I'm looking at, if I self-service for infrastructure, I need something that will sort of tear down that environment automatically. I'm not going to leave that to the developers to do. I want my infrastructure to be secure, the operating systems fully patched, but I don't want the developers to think about that. There are experts that can do that and sort of create like a template or a blueprint and offer that as a catalog. That's like some of the examples of guardrails that we want developers to have available. Actually, I said that the wrong way. Developers aren't primarily concerned with that, but that would help the organization. And then the developers just get what they want. Their environments get created as they want, and they can just move through life by committing code.
Some people are saying developers are going to own the thing end to end, and other folks look at that and say, well, if they really want to focus on, say, business logic in their craft, are they really going to be concerned about infrastructure and security? And so does that fall more towards the platform and the DevOps teams to find some way to automate that and the guardrails so they don't have to think about it?
Well, I think you're right. On that last thing, we're going to have to find, and that will fall on the DevOps team and their shoulders to figure that out. But to respond to your shift left and how far can that go? I've noticed a bunch of industries, and I have I don't know, maybe this is not a popular take, but I believe we'll shift so far left that will we need code committed by developers? I mean, I'm half tongue in cheek, just sort of joking about that, but we're going to see. I think development by developers is going to evolve. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not in the next year, but it's going to evolve to where their work life is going to change, and it won't look the same way that it does now. Let me give you an example. In the DevOps field, before it was called DevOps, I would just rack and stack computers and whatnot, and then we have cloud and whatnot. And soon, what I do in IT now looks nothing like when I started in this field. I haven't seen a cold room in maybe a decade. Okay, but I am still considered an infrastructure specialist. So I think the name of the game, and this is a theme in my life, including where I got from my parents too, is that your job has to evolve. And shifting left will be like automation is going to pick up what you're doing now, and you're going to have skills that manage that automation. I hope, yeah. So I think it's going to go far out there. I think we're going to, one of the things, just another example. Sorry if I'm rambling. Another example is, while coding, I can be burning the midnight oil, and over 2 decades of working in this field, my hands and my wrists, sort of, have that little bit of carpal tunnel. I've been experimenting with, talk to text type of, coding as well. And we're just going to see that developers 2 decades from now are going to look at my dad's like punch card programming, programs. We're just going to look at us like that, sort of.
Do you think as part of that automation, we'll get to some level of artificial intelligence where we'll just tell the machine what we're looking for, what we want, maybe some of the parameters, and the whole thing will just be automated and we won't have to think about it?
Something like that. We'll still have to worry about these concerns. These themes never change. Like my dad did the mainframe, and I'm not joking. He got super mad when I accidentally spilled these cards when I was a young kid, and I didn't understand. I just ruined his program. That was his college, thesis program. So, and that was never to be recovered. But my old man and I both have to diagnose and troubleshoot the same way. I joked about him. It's like, yeah, not all of us can find a moth that burnt out our fuse in our, in our computer to figure out what went wrong. Some of us have to dig through code. We'll need the same skills. It'll just look different. Like I said, with the talk to text, we'll all still, so we have to keep updating ourselves. And that's one of the things, so I talked about my dad, and now I'm talking about my children. So what I'm passing down to them is things like troubleshooting, things like communicating, things like algorithms, and analyzing it, because it'll be laughable. They're not going to use any of the same tools that I do.
It's kind of like going to the store with your dad before there were solid state televisions and you were looking at tubes and stuff like that. And now nobody even thinks twice about that. So the world increasingly does get automated. Hopefully, Ronak, your children will forgive you someday for something you did, and vice versa with your dad, and everybody will just keep moving along. But in the meantime, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Oh, wow. That was so much fun. We're already done. Okay. Mike, it was a pleasure. I'm glad to be with you. I hope to speak with you again.
All right, guys, back to you in the studio.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech Conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech Conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech Conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech Conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech Conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
All right, that wraps up another Techstrong TV broadcast. Hope you enjoyed watching it. I enjoyed bringing it to you as always. Just a quick reminder, we have a lot of really great events coming up, both in person and virtual. The first one we've got for you, coming at you, is Innotech Austin, which is happening April 27th. That's next Wednesday. Hope you can join us there. It's going to be a great day-long IT conference focusing on so many different things in the IT space, including cloud native and DevOps and cybersecurity, our three main focus areas. We've also got a lot of other events coming up for you. We've got another Innotech in May in Dallas, and we've got a lot of other day-long events lined up. Please do go to techstrongevents.com and check out the full lineup. You can look at the agendas, the speaker lineup, and register for the events. I'll be back on Thursday with a brand new broadcast. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day. And please, whatever you do, stay safe.